Hey everybody, it is Pastor Bill and welcome to a special holiday edition of the Real Faith for Real Life podcast. That's right, you're at the place that's all about the intersection of faith and life. And hey, we usually take a break during the month of December, but not this year. We're here with a special season devoted to a special topic that I think you're really going to enjoy. So this is our Advent series, our Christmas series of the podcast, and we're going to talk about this. Let me broach the subject this way. Hey, do you love giving gifts or do you love receiving gifts? What kind of gifts do you love to give? I am a firm believer that the way to a man's heart is through his stomach. And so listen, if you're watching on YouTube, you can kind of see the type of gifts that I love. I'm holding up these gigantic cookies that are about as big as my face, and they're beautifully decorated. I love that. I love getting gifts that are meaningful to me and just show that people are thoughtful and care about me. And I'm sure you do too. Well, listen, this holiday season, we want you to be thinking about one type of gift that you can give everybody in your life. And it is, frankly, the most important gift they could ever receive. And that is the gift of the gospel and a conversation about who Jesus is and how a person is made right with God. And so this season, we're devoting 5 episodes of the podcast to demystify this sometimes scary prospect of sharing Jesus during the holidays. You're going to encounter lots of people. You're going to have guests in your house. And for many of you, you want to have a spiritual conversation, whether that's with believers or non-believers, just to talk about Jesus and talk about things that are important. And yet you don't know where to start, and it's a little bit scary. Well, hey, that's what we're here for this season. We're going to just demystify how to do that and how to do it well with some simple steps, 5 steps, in fact. And our worship director, JP Gaylord, is going to head up this season of the podcast. He's going to have some conversations with our connections director, Julie Beeshold, and our discipleship pastor, Eric Vanderwall. And in part 1, you're about to hear, they're just going to talk about where to start. And that is how to make a list of people that you might want to consider having a conversation with and how to pray over that list. So let's throw it to JP now for part 1 of our series, Sharing Jesus.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to our podcast and our discussion on sharing Jesus during the holidays. We're really grateful you joined us. This is the first of, I think, 5 or maybe 6 podcasts. And really the intention is we're just going to talk about some basic questions and hopefully be able to encourage you as well as ourselves to be really intentional about reaching out to the people we're going to be meeting with during the holidays and just starting spiritual conversations. So the first step that we talked about that you have in your workbook talks about making a list and praying for people, which seems pretty straightforward, but maybe there are some questions people would be asking that we can talk about that would help us walk through that first step. So maybe you're there and you're like, man, I have these lines to fill up and I don't even know who to put on my list. So if I were to ask you guys, who would you put on your list, or how would you go about figuring out who to put on your list? What would you say?
Yeah, I would say a lot of that begins with kind of like this, a heart posture. And many of you know that I'm a guy who likes to be in tune with my heart. And so what does it look like right now for you to be with your eyes wide open and your heart wide open to the people who are around you? A lot of times we walk around very closed off to the world, almost kind of like looking down. I can actually walk my whole neighborhood and not see almost any of the houses because I'm just walking like staring down. Mm-hmm. It's like a natural posture for myself. But if I open up my heart to conversations and to different people and kind of lift my eyes up, I feel like I'm able to see a little bit more of who the Holy Spirit is putting in front of me. And I think that might be a great first step for some people.
Yeah.
Who do you see and feel around you as you're going about your daily life?
Mm-hmm. Julie, there are some people, like even as I think through maybe some people that I would put on my list, where the name comes to mind and I kind of snicker and I go, there's no way. If people at home or listening to the podcast are having those kind of same responses to names, what would you say to them?
I would say nothing is impossible for God. So it's not up to us, and we are just called to do our due diligence and to follow through and trust the process. We are a stepping stone in this process. And so lay your stone and surrender it to God's work.
Yeah, that's good. I actually had somebody say to me when we were in missions, they said, you keep trying to figure out who's going to be receptive to the gospel. Said the ultimate test for receptivity to the gospel is the gospel itself. And so the suggestion, the encouragement was simply don't try and make prejudgments about who's going to be receptive to this. Just start asking questions, just start sharing. And if they're not open to it, it'll become clear pretty quickly. So all that to say is you think through people on your list, don't necessarily leave people off the list because you don't think that they would be interested in a spiritual conversation. Now, as you're thinking through who to put on your list, do you guys think it would be better to put believers on the list, unbelievers, maybe a mix of both? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think for me, it's really a mix of both. There's this kind of principle out there, and I can't remember the exact number, but if the Holy Spirit prompts you with the name or a task to do, you have about 5 seconds, maybe 10 seconds to respond before that thing is just out of your mind and gone. I believe that if God is going to put somebody on your heart to share the gospel with, and he does do that through his Holy Spirit, just respond. You got about 5 seconds. Just put yourself out there. Write that name down within the next 5 seconds. Even if it's not in this workbook, just write it down somewhere, whether they're a believer or not. Maybe they just need to hear the good news of Jesus this Christmas time.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think there are far too many opportunities that come before us that we don't take advantage of. I know that I have had situations where I've had promptings from God that I've ignored and then absolutely regretted. So when I hear that prompting, I respond now a lot more willingly because it's God's voice.
Yeah, that's good. I think a lot of times we think about, I want to share the gospel and lead someone to Christ, which is a good thing. But I don't necessarily see it in those black and white terms anymore. And we'll talk about this a little bit next podcast. But our goal isn't so much to give a formal presentation of the gospel. Really, all we're trying to do is inspire spiritual thought, open up spiritual conversations, and really just see what the Lord wants to do. So rather than thinking about it in this, what's the point in sharing with a believer? Because they already believe the gospel. If we're looking at it in terms of spiritual conversations and just getting God on the playing field to do whatever it is he wants to do, I think believers totally fit into that list.
I agree.
The last question I have for us on this episode is this. What does it look like to pray? We've made a list. We've selected some names. We're asking you and ourselves to pray for the people on this list every day. What does that look like? Do I need like a half hour for each person on my list? Do I just need to say a 1-sentence prayer? What do you guys think?
I think you surrender it to God. What do you want me to do in this relationship? What does this person want from me? How can I lead them closer to you? What kind of relationship do you want this to look like? And just let God lead you into it.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, another way that I love what you're saying to say that is we speak and we listen. And so it's really on our hearts that if the Holy Spirit has prompted us with somebody's name, we're going to speak that name back to God. And then we're going to listen to hear what the Holy Spirit has to say for that next step. And we might not hear kind of this booming voice from on high, but the more we leave space for God to speak and to guide us, the less we'll be doing our thing and the more we'll be doing his thing. And so I would say, just speak that name. If all you can do is just say that name, hey, God, here's the name, and that's it, and then you just listen, that is a beautiful prayer. If you're somebody who's very eloquent with your words and willing to kind of almost like poetically speak to the Lord and you want to talk for 30 minutes with God, that's great. But definitely leave space to listen and see where the Holy Spirit's guiding you.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. It's scalable, so you can take as much time or as little time. You can make your prayer as eloquent or as simple as you need to, because really this is about you interacting with God, expressing your heart to Him and what you'd love to see happen in the lives of the people on this list. Well, those are the questions we've got. I understand these are the questions we're maybe anticipating you're asking. If you have other questions, or if you want to just interact with us a little bit more on what we're asking you to do, especially on making a list and praying, I just encourage you to send an email to hello@cascadefellowship.org, and we would be so happy to interact with you on that. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.
All right. Thank you guys so much for the conversation that you just shared with us. And I hope and pray everybody who's watching or listening takes that very first simple step in making a list and checking it twice, to use some holiday terminology, and beginning to pray over that list. We have resources available for you at cascadefellowship.org/sharing Jesus, or if you're attending our church here in Grand Rapids, you can pick up a booklet after the worship gatherings on Sundays. We'll continue in part 2. Hope to see you then. Happy holidays, everybody.